Perfect. We will begin the open session portion of our meeting today. We didn't make it through the entirety of our closed session agenda, so we are recessing until, and then we'll recommence the closed session portion after the conclusion of the public open session of the meeting. We do have a report from the first discussion in closed session that council received the non-union compensation review final report from Jane Mazansky, Gallagher Benefit Services Group, Inc., and to be added to the agenda as additional information, and that council has carried out a non-union compensation review to ensure that the township is compliant with the Pay Equity Act, and the council adopt the revised salary grid for non-union employees by utilizing a 60th percentile pay policy, and that the salary grid for non-union employees come into force and effect by November 1st, 2024. And as I said, we will be recommencing closed session after the meeting. Need a mover and a seconder for that. Councilor Byrne, Councilor Natchoff, all in favor? That is approved. Next on the item are the minutes from the regular council meeting held October 7th, that the minutes be approved as presented. Can I have a mover for those minutes? Councilor Byrne, Councilor Natchoff, all in favor? Those are approved. Secondly, the minutes from the Cavan Monaghan Public Library Board meeting of September 17th be received for information. Moved by Councilor Natchoff and Deputy Mayor Huntley, all in favor? That is approved. We move into the reports section of the agenda today, and the first report is Provincial Planning Statement 2024. Ms. Ellis.
Thank you, Mayor Graham, Deputy Mayor Huntley, members of council and staff. Planning Report 2024-48 is before you today with the recommendation that council receive report PEB 2024-48 for information. This report is intended to summarize some of the changes to the new provincial planning statement that became effective yesterday. So in terms of, I'm not going to read the report, but I'll just give you some quick highlights of things that I've noted. When we get to do our new official plan, we will need to have a look at the lands identified for growth for at least 20 years. Previously, we were looking at 30 years. Now the minimum requirement is 20 years. In addition, complete communities are still the theme. So notwithstanding the changes that have been made to the PPS, we are still looking at complete communities that have a variety of lands designated for different land uses. They need to have appropriate infrastructure and public service facilities. And those servicing needs have to accommodate our forecasted growth in a timely manner. So it's key that we do proper planning still. One of the key items is that council can consider settlement area boundary adjustments at any time. Under the last version of the PPS, we had to do that through a municipal comprehensive review. Now you or someone can make an application to do those adjustments. There are listed criteria in the PPS that must be considered when evaluating those adjustments. One other change is there is a requirement to use an agricultural system in the agricultural area. That agricultural system is a series of agricultural mapping, and that mapping has been provided to Peterborough County through the county official plan update. They have instituted that and used that, and once how the county moves forward gets resolved, we will then do our official plan. We will also be using that agricultural system mapping. We can tweak it at the time of our review, but essentially we will have to implement that system mapping. One of the other key changes is that 2 accessory or additional residential units can be permitted in rural and agricultural areas. So these are accessory residential units. There is a requirement that they be in the prime agricultural areas. They have to be in the farm building cluster. That means one inside the house and one in an accessory building, but in the cluster. So right now our official plan does not permit accessory residential units outside of the main dwelling. Right now we permit 1 accessory apartment. So when we do the new official plan, we will be discussing how council and the community want to move forward with some of these new permissions in the provincial legislation. So that's a high level summary of what the changes are. You will see it being implemented as we come forward with new planning applications, and we will be assessing those applications and their consistency with the new PPS as we move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. And just so for council's, sort of structure, we'll be enshrining the new PPS that we've been waiting for quite some time into the new iteration of the official plan, but we are still waiting and need to wait for the county OP to be approved by the ministry in order for us to move forward with our own commencement of our work for OP. Because our OP has to be consistent with the counties, and until the counties is approved, we can't obviously be quid pro quo consistent. Is that correct?
To you, Mayor Graham, members of council, that is correct. We are currently waiting. The Technical Advisory Committee has been working on making revisions to the county official plan as adopted to make it consistent with the PPS that has been out and about for a little while. But until we get concrete direction from the ministry on how the county is going to proceed, we are in a holding pattern. We have budgeted some money, and we do anticipate we will be able to start our process next year, fingers crossed, but at this point, we are still waiting that formal confirmation.
Yeah, I guess the start date will be predicated on depending on the province, if they're going to require the county to kind of go back to square one and start the whole process again, but we'll see what happens. Questions, members of council, Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, I really appreciate you summarizing all the changes, well, not all the changes, obviously, because there were a lot, but highlighting some of the key changes. But one of them you highlighted, I'm kind of struggling with. I don't quite understand it, and it's policy 2.8.1.3, or on page 4, the paragraph that starts, the PPS 2024 also requires development lands on 300 meters of employment areas to avoid or avoidance is not possible, minimizing or mitigate potential impacts on long-term economic viability. I'm really not sure what you've highlighted it because you think it's important, but I really don't understand from the gist of the sentence what it's saying.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Deputy Mayor Huntley and members of council. So the change in the new PPS is that we can permit some employment uses on lands closer to sensitive land uses. Sensitive land uses are residential, hospitals, schools, long-term care facilities, those types of things. So some uses that are not so obnoxious, like warehousing and things like that don't generate a lot of noise or disturbance, can be located closer to those sensitive uses than was previously permitted under the old PPS.
Other questions, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, it mentions here about the hamlet boundaries. In the past, I was under the impression that council could move them as long as they didn't cross a roadway, a waterway, or a railway. Does that still maintained, or is this new flexibility supersede that?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne and members of council. So you've got two different issues. So the one issue about the road, the railway, the water course, that's an interpretation of a land use designation boundary. So that's a policy that we have in our official plan that gives council and staff a little bit of flexibility on where the actual line of the designation is. With the PPS, in terms of settlement areas, which include hamlets, the expansion of those boundaries can be considered with direction from council through our new official plan process or through a private application from a member of the public. But those applications, whether it be ours or someone else's, to expand the hamlet boundary have to be evaluated in terms of the criteria listed in the PPS. So we still have to do good planning in terms of looking at the servicing capacity, the roads. Do we have enough fire and admin and recreation services? Does it make sense in terms of our long-term growth planning? Because we still have to focus on complete communities and doing proper planning. But so you have two different questions going at the same time.
But just for clarity, but what's changed in regards to the boundary expansion is the requirement for the municipal comprehensive review, right? Because that was the only way by which you had to proceed with the adjustments of the boundaries therein, and that is no longer required. There's still planning requirements, don't get me wrong, but there was no way around or circumventing a municipal comprehensive review previous to this new, or the adoption enshrinement of this new policy. That's the bigger change when it comes to the boundary adjustments. That was my interpretation. So I want to make sure I'm right. Thank you, Ms. Ellis.
To you, Mayor Graham, members of council, yes, you're mostly correct. The one thing I just want to make clear is under the previous version of the PPS, there were some boundary of expansions of hamlets, some minor adjustments, right? You were limited to less than 40 hectares. And that had to be balanced. You know, if we added hamlet here, we took some away there kind of thing. This means that we can, without the benefit of a municipal comprehensive review, we can look at an expansion of a settlement area, provided it can meet all of the criteria established in the PPS and the criteria established in the county official plan and our own official.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Other questions, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, it mentions in a couple of different places about rural lots and how the flexibility is going to be allowed. I've never been a favor of carving up good farmland, but there are lots of residential lots that people are wanting on side roads and whatever, and they've been restricted in the past. It looks like this changes that. It actually refers to if it's a farm-related residential unit, it can be built on prime farmland, correct now, I think. I just wondered, when does that take effect? Like this happened a few days ago, but if it conflicts with our official plan, which might conflict with the county official plan, when does all this come into play for people if they're looking down the road?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne and members of council. So in terms of timing, our official plan opportunities for lot creation follow the consent policies in our official plan. So those policies or that policy direction won't be enshrined until we adopt a new official plan and it gets approved by Peterborough County. So we're a little bit away from that at this moment in time. The key thing to remember is that residential lot creation is not permitted still in rural and agricultural areas. There has been flexibility and we do permit at this moment in time surplus farm dwelling severances. So if you are a bona fide farmer and you have farm over here with your house and you buy another piece, there's a house on it and you don't want that, there is the ability to sever off that surplus farm dwelling under certain criteria and under certain conditions. So that is being maintained in the new PPS. They're specifically identifying it though as permissions. We have always permitted in Cavan Monaghan a house to be built on prime agricultural land. And now it's enshrined in the PPS so everyone in Ontario will have the same basic policy to follow.
But I think it's an important clarification that I think Councilor Byrne is kind of going to, is that the ability to build a secondary or a tertiary dwelling under the new legislation, that doesn't mean you'll be able to sever the lot to create 3 different residential areas. Like you're permitted to build a residential structure, but that's not permitted. That doesn't impact the severability of that lot, the fact that you've created an additional dwelling there. And because of the restrictions with regards to, as you mentioned, the proximity or not on the prime or agricultural lands, that would still be an encumbrance. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to members of council. So under this legislation, they have provided the flexibility to permit a maximum of 2 additional residential units. So that is a permissive policy. We can decide to implement that and allow 2 additional residential units. You could decide, no, we don't want to. We're only going to continue on with the 1 we permitted. We can take it to the community. Like there's lots of things to be discussed about how, if we want to go that way, what criteria should be established, if any. But the intention in the PPS is that for additional residential units, you will not be able to sever them from the farm. They are intended to be additional residential units for farm families, farm help. And so they will probably, I would think many people will probably restrict them in size relative to the main dwelling, and they do have to be located within the farm building cluster. That is a little bit flexible in terms of what you consider in close proximity, but I think those are the questions that we will be talking to you about and to the community and having a discussion among staff as well, what we see as an appropriate balance. Because when you think about all the farm properties we have, and if you've got 1 dwelling unit now, and then all of a sudden now we have 3 on every property. What does that do to your firefighting services, the police services, schools, libraries, recreation? There's lots of things to think about when considering permitting additional uses on a property.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Other questions? Councilor Byrne? Oh, sorry.
Through the chair, on page 15, the policy 2.1.6, cleverly words in this DEI principle and the 15-minute city concept, this complete communities. How is that going to affect our hamlets? Like this concept that you got to build these communities around this concept? Is that going to be a restriction for our hamlets?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne and members of council. So the idea of a complete community has always kind of been the goal. That's why development has been focused in those communities that provide piped water and sewer servicing. Those are the areas where you get the mix of residential, commercial, and some employment uses as well. That is still the goal. So you'll know right now in Millbrook, that's our only service settlement area. That's where we have lots of commercial and a mix of residential. In the hamlets today, many of our hamlets tend to be more focused on residential uses only. We do have a couple of hamlets, Bailey-Borough, 5 Mile Turn, that we do have a little bit of a mix. So in terms of the hamlets, we could be looking to have a little more mix. But Millbrook will remain as the focus for development under our current policy framework. So, but that, as I say, in the other hamlet areas, we could look, right now, the designation does permit a variety of uses, but to date, we have seen mostly residential proposals.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Other questions? If not, we're just receiving this report for information for today. And again, we'll wait and see what happens with the county. I know there's a lot of advocacy going on to sort of not require us to have to go all the way back to the start and the public process all over again. And obviously that has big implications for the commencement of our document too. But thanks for a great report and a good summary as well. Karen, appreciate it. Motion to receive for information, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Natchop, all in favor? That is approved. Thanks again. Next report, Public Works. 2024-22 RFQ PW 24-01 Brookside Street Storm Sewer Construction. Mr. Hutchison.
Thank you, Mayor Graham. Through you to council. Before you, we have Public Works Report 2024-22 with recommendations regarding the RFQ for the Brookside Street Storm Sewer Construction. The recommendations before you are as follows. Recommendation 1 is that council award the Brookside Street Storm Sewer Construction RFQ-PW-24-01 Phase 1 to Nick Carchidi Excavating at the RFQ amount of $85,362.71 with the net municipal HST of $1,502.38, a 10% contingency of $8,686.51 for the total RFQ amount being $95,551.60. This would be within the approved 2024 capital budget for the Brookside Street reconstruction. And recommendation 2 is that council award the Brookside Street Storm Sewer Construction RFQ-PW-24-01 Phase 2 to Nick Carchidi Excavating at the RFQ amount of $110,475.36 with the net municipal HST of $1,944.37 and a 10% contingency of $11,241.97. The total RFQ amount is $123,661.70 to be funded through a pre-approval in the amount of $125,000 in the 2025 Public Works capital budget for the Brookside Street storm sewer construction. The Brookside Street subdivision was built in the early 2000s. The design of these houses did not include a storm connection. They were built on a sump pump design. And over the last few years, we have been seeing issues with these sump pumps. Notably, a lot of them are directed to the sanitary service. And the ones that are not going to the sanitary, they are being discharged on private property. And in this area, there are some that are discharging to the front yard. And the only way for the water to get away is to go on the sidewalks. And over the last few years, this has been a safety concern because there has been an increase of ice buildup on the sidewalks in this area. And after doing a bit of investigation and talking with some of the residents, we have put together a design, working with Valdor Engineering to put a secondary storm sewer, which would be located behind or in the boulevard behind the curb. And then we can connect into the existing storm catch basins and outlet it to the stormwater management pond just off Baxter's Creek Port there. Thanks.
Okay, Drew, thanks for that report. So what, in essence, what you're asking for is sort of a high level summary of phase one and then a pre-approval for the phase two component so that can be completed as well. So the phase one is the portion in red that's been completed, and then phase two would get it all the way to Tupper Street. That's correct? Perfect. Okay. Questions, members of council? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to Drew, when I look at the map, it looks like you're going down the middle of the road. You mentioned you're not going to do road construction. You mentioned it's going to be on the boulevard. Is it going to be both sides of the road? And I'm trying to figure out how this helps Baxter Creek. So there's private property, I don't know who owns it, vacant land behind most of the houses on Baxter Creek. And from what I can tell, the fall down to that catch runoff pond, these sump pumps run pretty much steady in these houses. They built it in a swamp. I get that, but when we're all worried about saving energy, is there any way, instead of going down the boulevard and cutting up, I don't know whether you're going to dig up the driveways and repave them, how that's planned, or are you tunneling underneath to try to get this tile drainage in? Could you bring me up to speed on a little bit of that, please?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne, we are, for this phase one and phase two, it is working to improve the issues on the north side of the road. So we, as you mentioned, we will be in the boulevard. Carchedi has a tool to a smaller unit for directional drilling that they are hoping to be able to use in this area to go under the sidewalk as well as the driveways, as you mentioned. So at this time, we're hoping we should be able to use that unit and not have to tear up anyone's driveway. We have budgeted for the case where they can't use that tool in this area, that we would remove the existing driveway and repave. So that is included in the budget. So there is a bit of cost saving there if we are able to use the directional drilling unit. You mentioned the property behind the units on Baxter's Creek. That is township property that we have the stormwater management pond on. I think that's what you're referring to there. So it would, the new storm sewer would connect into the existing and then go to the same discharge point.
Follow up, Councilor Byrne, and then I'll go to Councilor Natchoff. Sorry.
Through the chair. Yes. So what I'm wondering is now also from what I understand, lot 20 and 22 on the north side of Brookside are the big problem or the worst problem for the ice on the road draining off to the front and causing a slippage problem. There's also a strip of land right behind all of those houses running east-west. I believe it belongs to the school board, but it's actually not used. There's a double fence there with a separation of 4 or 5 feet. Is there any potential, instead of ripping up the boulevards and stuff, to get permission and tile drain so that maybe these sump pumps could be, the drainage could be put in low enough that they wouldn't need to run the sump pumps all the time and we wouldn't have to dig up any of the boulevard? We just tunnel underneath that area of land, similar to going down the west side of Baxter Creek into that wooded area that I don't know if that's still Cabin Township property. I know where the pond, you mentioned it, but the vacant land actually runs around the back of those houses on the west side of Baxter Creek. Is that an option that's been looked at?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne. I'm not positive on that area land west of the houses on Baxter's Creek. I'm not positive if that's private property or township owned. I would have to double check. Miss Ellis just did confirm it is township property. Regarding the area you're speaking about on the north side of the houses, so that is correct. It is the school board property, and it is a drainage ditch for the school board. So all their drainage from there, the yard does go into that ditch and then moves east to a catch basin closer to Tupper Street. Because of the elevations, I don't know if we could make that work there in the backyards of these homes. There is quite an elevation change to the school property. So I don't know if we would be able to have it gravity fed from the houses to drain on that. And with it being private property, it would be a bit of a process to get permission from the school board, I believe. So that's why we have gone in the direction to do a secondary storm drain on, or in the boulevard.
Councilor Nacho?
Thank you through you, Chair. Drew, can you just, I'm assuming confirm, as far as the directional drilling goes, because there's gas lines through all of the houses there, does the directional drilling goes underneath the gas line? Obviously, they're not going through the gas lines, but like, how does that from a safety standpoint, and just explain to me how that works?
Through Mayor Graham to Councillor Natchoff. Before all construction projects, they do get locates for any utility services or existing infrastructure that are in the boulevards. I believe in this area, the gas main is right beside the sidewalk. So we're going to be going between the sidewalk and the boulevard as close as we can to the curb. So I believe we will be missing the gas main in this location. And then if there are services going to the residents on the north side or the south side, it would depend on the specific location. They would have to hand dig to see the elevation of the gas main and other utilities, and then match into our design to get the storm sewer either above or below, depending on the grade of all the utilities in that area.
Follow?
Thank you through you, Chair. Just, and as a follow-up, just from my time working at Nexicom, they kind of not a cart before the horse, and obviously they built the subdivision before fiber, and knowing later on the technologies and stuff. The time came then that they had to, Nexicom on their costs had to cut up all of the Brookside to put fiber in, which wasn't that long ago, only in the last 5 years. Is there a possibility that we could look at something similar if down the road, say if it's like other parts of the municipality where it's a storm sewer replacement, or that would necessarily, like obviously this case, given the floodplain area and the swampiness of everything, it's a little bit more of a one, individual case by case, but maybe we could look at it in a bigger picture and project so that we could work with Nexicom to go, hey, if you don't have fiber in this area yet, and they can provide you with all the maps in the village and the township where they have it, or you could say, hey, we're potentially going to put a storm sewer, or be doing digging in this, we could do a collaborative with them so that it's not a matter of like, perfect example. We replaced the sewer or water and sewer systems through the downtown on King Street, didn't consult Nexicom, and we weren't able to put fiber through at that time. And then it happened at a later stage going further west along King Street. So do you think we can maybe add this to our, working with them so that we're not digging twice and it's saving taxpayers money, and it could save them money as well?
Through Mayor Graham to Councillor Natchoff, we can definitely do that in the future. We do have a couple of good connections with Nexicom right now that we work together with, whether it be their projects or our projects, that sort of thing. So This is a bit of a one-off project, like you mentioned. Typically, when we do full reconstructions, we do include storm, sanitary, and water, and it's typically in the middle of the road. So this is a one-off because we're doing it in the boulevard, just because it is a fairly new subdivision and the infrastructure is still in good shape with a lot of life left. So we don't want to rip up to put the storm sewer down the middle of the road. So it is a one-off, but like you mentioned, it is in the future, we definitely will include them on any circulation for projects, or if they have interest in a specific area and we know we're doing work in the near future, then we can definitely work with them on that.
Deputy Mayor Huntley?
Through you, Chair. I guess, there's a long history of, issues with the school draining into that area as well. Like, is this project going to help alleviate some of that flooding and some of that water problems that we've had in that area?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Deputy Mayor Huntley. It is our hope that it does help. Last year, we did work with the school board to acknowledge some of the issues with their drainage. And we did have a little bit of an odd winter last year, but we didn't, with the improvements the school board did on their site, they did clean out the existing drainage ditch. There was a lot of blockage and it didn't allow water to really pass through it. So they did do a full clean out of their ditch, which did help last year. Although we didn't have nearly the amount of snow as we normally would. But this past spring, there weren't nearly as many issues as in past years. So we're hoping that continues to help throughout the next number of years. And we're hoping that a secondary storm sewer in this location will address all of the sump pump issues as well. Because I know there are a few sump pumps that are discharged to the back of the property as well, and it kind of pools up in that area. So we're hoping we can direct those sump pumps as well as the ones that are connected to the sanitary and discharging to the front of the properties that are creating the issue on the sidewalk, and we can get those all going to the proper space.
Councillor Edgerton?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Drew. I do believe quite a few years ago, they were having the same problem with that water up there. And the township put either a ditch or a pipe at that very north end of the lot. And it drained out to County Road 10 to get rid of the sump pump water. Like it was, I don't know if it was on school property or where they made a deal with the property owners and run right at the very back of their property. But I think there was a pipe put in there to look after that problem then.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Edgerton. Yeah, the school board did put in a ditch, and I believe there was a subdrain in it to help with the issues on the school property. I'm not aware that that was ever connected to the private residence on that stretch of road. I believe that was just to improve the drainage issues on the school board property.
Thanks, Drew. Other questions? Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair to Drew, the timing, when do you expect stage one and when do you expect stage two, and why is there two separations?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to Councillor Byrne. So Carchidi Excavating, they're ready to start within the next couple of weeks. And they can get both phase one and phase two done before winter starts. So it's not, the schedule for this project is not very long. It would be about 6 weeks. So we're hoping to get it done before the snow really hits this winter. And it will be completed all at once. We did break it down into 2 phases because of the budget restraints. Because it's a one-off job, it was kind of hard to price this sort of job. So we did in the RFQ, we put both phases in one quote, just to get a range and an idea of what we would need and what we need to budget for next year. But talking to Carchedi, they are willing to do it all at once and have it done before the winter.
So on that, just to clarify, and I'm going to look to you, I think, Ms. Hurley, because I don't see Ms. Burke here. So for council's clarity, like with regards to recommendation one, this project has already been approved in the 2024 capital budget. So I'm weary about reapproving a recommendation that for a capital project that's already been approved, but I can be told that that's the right thing to do. It just seems a bit odd to me. I don't recall doing that ever, but maybe I'm wrong. But when it comes to recommendation number two, the issue is Carchedi can go and is scheduled to construct the work sooner than later, as Drew mentioned, but they were only scheduled to do the one portion instead of both phases. And so by pre-approving the second phase, we can get it all done this year, is kind of how I interpret it. I just was a little leery about recommendation number one because it's already an approved capital budget item.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, what you're approving as one is actually the RFQ. So just clarification. So yes, we do have the budget set aside in our 2024 budget. It's been identified. But given the RFQ and how they sent it out in almost like as a two-part, you can either do one or two, but in conversation, as Drew alluded to with Carchedi, they said, you know what, we could do this all this year. We could do it at one time, only disrupt the residents from that one time as well. If council would pre-approve the funds, which we were going to identify in 2025. That's why it's before you today as a full project.
So we have the final RFQ for phase one and it's under budget, which you've alluded to in the report. So this is the finalization of that work as well. Okay, that makes sense to me now. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to Drew, just so when people call me and ask, so you're only going to be doing work on the north side of Brookside in the Boulevard area? None of it will extend down Baxter Creek at all, and none of it will go across the south side of Brookside. It's just going to be on the north edge, and it'll eventually connect that chunk of road to the County Road 10.
Through you, Mr. Mayor to Councillor Byrne. Yes, that is correct. It is just on the north side of Brookside. Because of the elevation and the situation that we have on the north side, there really is an area for the water to get away. On the south side of Brookside and on Baxter's Creek, it is a little bit different because the elevation, it can be directed to the south, which goes to the stormwater management pond. And then on the west side of Baxter's Creek, it is township private property behind that, which is more of a wetland down there. So the key issues that we've seen after investigating is on the north side of Brookside. And so that's why we're having the secondary storm sewer along the back of the curb. And then, as you mentioned, it will connect into the existing storm sewer just before the intersection of Brookside and Tupper.
Thanks, Drew. Other questions? If not, there's two recommendations in the report. The council award Brookside Street Storm Sewer Construction RFQ PW 24-01 Phase 1 to Nick Carchedi Excavating at the RFQ amount of $85,362.71 with a net municipal HST of $1,502.38 and a 10% contingency of $8,686.51. The total RFQ amount is $95,551.60 as approved within the 2024 capital budget under Brookside Street Reconstruction. And the second, that council award Brookside Street Storm Sewer Construction RFQ PW 24-01 Phase 2 to Nick Carchedi Excavating at the RFQ amount of $110,475.36 with the net municipal HST of $1,944.37 and a 10% contingency of $11,241.97. The total RFQ amount is $123,661.70 to be funded through the pre-approval in the amount of $125,000 in the 2025 Public Works capital budget for the Brookside Street Storm Sewer Construction. Those are the motions. Any questions about the motions or the recommendations from the report? Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, I think we need to first and second it, then we'll discuss. Sure. I'll first it.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Natchoff. Questions with regards to the motion?
Yeah, and through you, Chair, I guess if we discover that the alternative method of drilling it is more cost efficient, I assume at the budget time you'll come back and readjust the second quote? Or will you not know until you're into phase 2 whether that methodology is working?
Through you, Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Huntley. Yes, we will. I don't know exactly what the cost savings will be. Talking to Carchidi, it would be the cost savings if we were to directionally drill rather than tear up the existing driveways and repave. It's just whether we're able to use that for every driveway, or there are some locations that we can't, or they can't get the drill in to use that. So once we have a better idea, once we're working, then we will definitely amend the budget if we can.
So it's probable then, I think where Deputy Mayor Huntley is going, by the time we get to even close to the second or third reading of the budget, we'll probably know what the totality is of that, if there is a savings available to achieve by the boring process, like you mentioned. Okay. Any other questions about the two recommendations in the report? If not, we have a mover and a seconder. We'll call for a vote. All in favor? That is approved. Thanks, Drew. Great. Thanks for answering all those questions. We appreciate that. Next, sorry, I just got to flip the wrong page. The next report is the CAO report, capital status, Ms. Hurley.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Council. The capital report is before you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it. Those are the reports that you see right now are coming forward as they have been identified. The capital projects are ones that we're dealing with right now. Some of them will be rollovers and will be identified in your the first draft of the budget process, but it just gives you an update of where we are on this year's final capital projects.
Questions about the report, members of council? If not, we'll take a mover and a seconder to receive the report for information. Moved by second question. Question, Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, I guess when I look at is there more work to be done in the Millbrook Valley Trails? Because I see the bridge and boardwalk is still says in progress. I just wonder if that's something we can close off or.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the Deputy Mayor. I believe that project is completed, so it will be removed the next time you see the broad.
No, yeah, I was on the trails last week and it's very well done. The only thing I didn't know if you were leaving it on there for was there is some materials from the previous formations that I didn't know if were being removed. So that might be something to consider if, or maybe investigate before. I just wasn't sure if it looks great. It's done. It's a big improvement. The bridge is fantastic, but yeah, I would be curious to know if they're planning on actually removing some of those materials. If no other questions, we'll take a mover and a seconder for that report for information. Moved by Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. Moving on, council committee verbal reports. Any committee updates? Councillor Natchoff.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just the Kanaraska Regional Conservation, our meeting last week, the board of directors has received the 2025 preliminary budget for information purposes, and they have requested that the budget be forwarded to the watershed municipalities for their consideration for the 2025 levy. I'm just seeing in front of me here that Mrs. Laliberty has sent this to Mrs. Hurley. So otherwise, that's all I have to report on that.
Thank you, Councillor Natchoff. Other committee updates? Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair, I had the opportunity last Thursday to attend an information type gathering there at Sir Sanford Fleming College. With this new technology, they're going to go partnership with. The college is going to get involved in hopefully upgrading it even more than it is, but they're talking about a standalone wastewater sewage type system that they could actually scale up and possibly do the subdivision out at Kawartha Downs or possibly other things in Ontario if it all gets formulated the way they're hoping to. Seem to be a good turnout. Anyways, just to bring people up to speed on it.
Okay, any other committee updates? Seeing none, we get a mover and a seconder for those committee verbal updates. Moved by Councillor Natchoff, seconded by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. There is no general business. There is no correspondence for information. There is no correspondence for action. Just to confirm with the clerk. So I am, thank you for that, Ms. Page. So we will do the first bylaw, that bylaw number 2024-56, being a bylaw to regulate traffic and parking within the limits of the township of Campbell. Be read a first, second, and third time and passed this 21st day of October, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the corporate seal attached thereto. And I get a mover for that bylaw, moved by Councillor Natchoff, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. There is no unfinished business. Any notices of motion? Seeing none. So that concludes the open session content. And because we recessed from closed session, now is the time in the meeting where we will be recommencing closed session, and we'll come back out with a confirming bylaw and a motion for adjournment. So with that, we need a mover and a second to move back into closed session. Councillor Byrne, Deputy Mayor Huntley, all in favor? That is approved. Thank you, everyone. We will be coming back online very briefly for that adjournment and the confirming bylaw and a list of upcoming events, but you'll see that in a second feed. I imagine it won't be part of the same one. So sorry for the confusion, but we need to get back to the business at hand.